Okay. How about now? Testing. What is going on? There we go. Coming through. Wow. Ah, the joys of, let me just mute everything on my end. Okay. So, sorry about that. Thank you, Mo. I understand what happened, and not quite sure how I'm going to solve it long term, but it's because my headphones were not active. The system audio was playing out of my speakers, and Windows is looping it into vMix. And I'm not quite sure why that is happening. It's been happening for a couple months. Need to get rid of it. So hopefully audio is working now. Let me just do another check. Okay, I think we are good. So let's get on with it. Cheers for the second time. Okay, so if you have a question, um, no beatbox, yeah. Um, if you have a question, send a question, comment, say hello on Twitter, YouTube, Twitch. Hello, Dimitri. Hello, Mo. Welcome. Come on in. Ah, grab a cup. It has been a week. So I have been putting the weekend at the end, but it's not the weekend yet. So I'm just going to recap the weekend. Unfortunately, my last weekend was not pleasant. And yes, I have an article here from the CDC website, which kind of sums up my weekend. And I returned from El Salvador thinking I was okay. It's like, okay, I made it back this time without getting a stomach bug, without getting COVID, which I've had from the flight back. But then a couple days later, it hit me, and yeah, not pleasant. And I am still sick, unfortunately, a week later. So, what is interesting about this article is that 30 to 70% of travelers after a 2 week visit to another country can get these symptoms. And it is not necessarily, food hygiene or obvious stuff. It's just, I was in El Salvador for a month and pretty hard to avoid whatever, non native bacteria to my body I might have consumed. So it has been rough. Went to the doctor, got antibiotics, but it is still not resolved. So, yeah, kind of tired, and we'll try to get through this. And starting off the week, this week was a full week of customer training on site. I looked into going to the customer site, but it was like over $1,000 for a plane ticket because it was kind of a last minute thing. So I was joining Tanya there. So Tanya's doing the training all week, and I'm just joining remotely via Teams. And it is fascinating to observe on-site training after having done training, Business Central training in El Salvador for a month. It's a very, very different process, agenda, discussions, experience than generic Business Central training. And the primary observation is that I would say confidently a majority of the conversations and content that occur during the on-site customer-specific training are customer-specific discussions. There is the initial, some navigation stuff. How do you use these features? But from that point forward, it is nearly all discussions of what is going to be done in Business Central, not how to use Business Central. So finance, purchasing, and sales, sure, but it's very much about the processes and procedures of that customer. Very, very specific discussions that are not, generic training that you would give at a conference, say. And for example, field level use case discussions. And not what is this field, but how are we going to specifically use this field in our business? How are we going to use this particular dimension value, for instance? So much more specific. And while I could follow much of it, a lot of the discussion was back and forth about a very specific topic that Tanya has much greater depth on, and it was not a general training. So it was a really interesting discussion and kind of taught me that I was thinking I would take notes and improve my training curriculum for ERP Center of Excellence. I took a few notes, but honestly, the vast majority of the discussion was so specific to this customer that I learned a few tips and tricks, but it was not generally applicable to generic Business Central training. So that was an interesting lesson. And how are we doing on audio? Just making sure. I'll do my DJ headset thing here. There we go. Okay. Got some significant lag there. So with that, and so other than field level use cases, there was a lot of discussion of personalization, customizations, integrations, all the unique aspects of the business process, and like Business Central core functionality and generic functionality is just a small subset of that training. Okay, so on Monday, in addition to the training, which I start at 6 a.m. Pacific time, it's early days for me all week. Been doing 12, 14-hour days all week because I'm starting at 6 a.m. and going to 8 p.m. for evening calls. One of the things that we've been digging into just as a side project had to do with price lists, the new sales pricing experience, as it's called in GP now. A lot of people complain because it's very different than the old pricing model. So that's one issue. And however, when we used it, we thought, oh, it's not too bad. We can get used to this and make it work. Well, we just had one scenario for a customer. And now that we've really dug into it for the second time, we're starting to see the issues with it. And my interpretation, like, various pieces of functionality that get added to ERP systems over the years, if you've been around long enough, is that this was not developed by experienced Nav Business Central developers. That is my guess. I have no information as to how or why this was developed, but just the user experience using this, you're just left constantly asking, what? Why? Why does it behave this way? It is not consistent in behavior with other pieces of functionality of Business Central, in my humble opinion. And the first and most obvious one is set up a sales price list, enter a code, and then try to change that code. Won't let you. It's grayed out. You cannot change that code, as far as I know. And that's a pretty significant, just obvious sign that something's different here. I can change a customer number. I can change a vendor number. I can change an item number. You can change just about anything in BC. There are a few limitations, but you can change the master codes or IDs of records. You can't do that here with a sales price list. Kind of odd, kind of your first clue that something's different. And then once you go set up this price list and you assign it to a customer price group, well, try changing that price group. You can't, because if you have lines in there, it won't let you. You have to delete all of the lines on the sales price list before you can change the customer price group. And then the view columns for price, just the way that works, just not good in my humble opinion. And then you start to see this, if you see the status flag and you understand the validation that needs to occur, like I get that it wants to do validation, but the way it is implemented, I'm constantly wondering, what were they thinking? And my assumptions are this was not developed by an experienced BC Nav developer who had an understanding of the conventions. It was perhaps developed or outsourced on a budget, and there was not enough design and review and hands-on testing done. It's just kind of rough. It's kind of late at this point, but we're fighting this for a customer right now. And there's a pretty significant bug in the customer price group implementation that I believe Tanya is going to write a blog post. I don't want to cover it here. I'll let her do her blog post and then I'll cover it on a future session. It's just a horrible bug. And you make one mistake and boom, everything is gone. Just deletes all your data. So no bueno, as one might say. So let me know, have you used the new sales price experience extensively? We initially thought it was fine. We are now seeing all the dark corners of it, and it's kind of rough. So we're having to do quite a few custom workarounds to get it to behave for our needs. Tuesday, martes, I attended my first Spanish class. I've been looking for a Spanish class program other than Babbel, Duolingo, whatever. I want an interactive class, I want instruction, and I signed up for a Spanish class taught by someone who lives in El Salvador. And she's not from El Salvador, but she, as a native Spanish speaker from another country, is living in El Salvador, and she is able to point out some of the differences between Salvadoran Spanish and, say, Mexico Spanish or Spain Spanish. They are significantly different. And I'm told Argentina Spanish is a whole nother universe of Spanish. So Spanish is not Spanish. If you go to El Salvador and you speak a certain way, like you use Mexican words or Spanish words, they can be very uncommon in El Salvador, and vice versa. El Salvador has some very interesting colloquialisms in Spanish. So started that, and que la vaya bien. Like, we practiced that, and I'm learning that has very specific context. Like, you don't just casually say that. There are certain situations where you might say that, at least in El Salvador. So I'm kind of leaning towards the more generic things like adios, right? And then buenos dias, buenas tardes, and in El Salvador, you can just say buenos. It's kind of the generic greeting to avoid having to know what time of day it is. Very interesting quirks of the language. And one of the books that I picked up to supplement the class is this Madrigal's Magic Key to Spanish. And it's kind of a nice guide of some of the language hacks where, if you know English, there are a lot of shared words and principles to the language between English and Spanish. So it emphasizes that. And moving on to another interesting BC topic, a customer encountered this. If you have an item with an apostrophe in the item number, it causes posting to fail. I don't know all the scenarios, but I just did an inventory receipt with an item number of 150 foot rope, so 150 apostrophe rope. And if you attempt to post an item receipt with that item number, it will fail. And you see an error occurred while interpreting the filter, did not expect value, apostrophe, rope, double apostrophe, it looks like. So what is happening is apostrophes are being escaped, and the way that BC is escaping those apostrophes is either in itself, the escaping process is wrong, there's a bug there, or there's a bug in how those filters are then being applied elsewhere. Because you notice we've got both of those going on while interpreting the filter. So something is wrong with BC filters and apostrophes. And in this case, it's actually causing posting failures. And I don't know how long this particular one has been a problem, but I'll show the next one. It's been a while. So filters and apostrophes, based on that posting failure, I did some subsequent testing and found that if you have an apostrophe in almost any field, as far as I could tell, I chose customer name. I did customer number and now customer name and confirmed that it is an issue. And it manifests itself through this particular action. And thanks to Tom Capitan for figuring out why. I thought it was a generic apostrophe bug, but it appears to be specific to this action, filter to this value. And when you do that, it invokes an action or a procedure that builds the filter based off of that apostrophe value. And it results in something like this. And if you aren't clicked on that filter name value field, you just see double apostrophe. And that's kind of the clue that something's wrong. So you see Steve O double apostrophe O'Hara, and you will not get any results. And if you click on that field, you will see it is surrounded by apostrophes, double apostrophe, and sometimes you'll see even 4 apostrophes inserted in there. So it's like double or triple escaping the apostrophe. So there's definitely a bug in the filter to this value process. And that appears to be affecting list pages where you use filter to this value, and in certain cases where the apostrophe is involved with posting, for instance, it causes that to fail. So that is a bug. Tom posted it to Yammer to get it recorded, and so we'll see if that gets fixed. I went back to version BC 22.0 in Docker, and the issue did exist. I think Tom looked back to version 16, and it did not exist. So somewhere between 16 and 22, a bug was introduced in the filter of apostrophes. And Wednesday, miércoles, MVP renewals were distributed finally. So lots of renewals, a few non-renewals. Unfortunately, it does generally happen, but lots of renewals. So I'm sure you saw the flood of people announcing that on Twitter. And my partner in crime, Tanya, and I were both renewed. So cheers to all. It is a stressful day or week for many of us, but when we do get the email, if we are renewed, it is a sigh of relief. And then on Wednesday, after that nail-biting process, I had a customer prospect call where we were, the opportunity was to assist a customer with Business Central with some type of very complex system integration they needed. And 10 people attended the call. 10. Myself, a partner, 8 people from the customer. We did not get to discussing anything or what we can offer because nobody knew what ERP system they were using. There was one person on the call, fortunately, who was kind of able to put the pieces together to help us understand what system they were using. And thank you, Microsoft, for making that nearly impossible for everyone. And the customer kept referencing Navision for some reason in the initial emails, but then he said, no, we're not using Navision, we're using Business Central. Well, turns out they apparently had been using Navision, but they were on Business Central 14, I believe, implemented, they said they believed around 2015, I believe. So Business Central 14, they think they implemented around 2015. So the call was really 10 minutes of us trying to figure out what ERP system they were using, only to discover that they are not using Business Central Online, and we don't deal with Navision or on-prem BC, so we were not able to assist them. And turns out they also had this was for one division of the larger company, and the parent company uses F&O. So they have no desire to upgrade, and they're going to consume this company and push it into F&O. So welcome to the world of Microsoft Dynamics, where customers have no idea what software they're actually using. And just for clarification, I use the terminology Business Central Online because SaaS doesn't communicate well for customers who don't know what that means. So I say BC Online, Business Central Online, hosted BC. And what further confused this conversation is they have BC 14 on-prem, but it is hosted with their partner, apparently. So they thought they had Business Central Online. So even online doesn't really clarify things generally. So that was a fun phone call, unproductive, but not surprising these days. And then I had my evening internal development meeting where we cover all of our Business Central Dev projects and topics. And educational opportunities. If you're in Australia in August, why don't you sign up for Dimitri's workshop on Copilot development for Business Central? It is a full day workshop, August 20th in Sydney, August 26th in Melbourne, a little bit south of there. You could attend both. I mean, Sydney's great, Melbourne's great, great coffee in Melbourne. And you can go over to katzin.com/trainings to sign up. And there is the information here, €595 per attendee for a full day workshop. And I hear this guy, Dimitri, knows a little bit about AI and Copilot, as he is the developer of the CentralQ.ai search engine, which I highly recommend using if you work with Business Central. Amazing search engine. Really, I don't bother with Google or DuckDuckGo anymore for Business Central content. I just try to go directly to Central Q to get my question answered. So another event is a Doug meetup. This is the Ohio Regional Meetup in Dublin, Ohio. August 27th and 28th at the Embassy Suites by Hilton. There is the QR code for the Eventbrite registration page, or you can head over to dynamicsusergroup.com/meetup and go check it out. I don't know what the content is, but it is Power Platform, F&O, CE, BC. And so go check the agenda if you're planning on attending. Because I'm sure people are heading into Dublin, Ohio from the region. Okay, moving on. We also have the Summit NA Roadshows. I was not aware of this, but it sounds like this is an attempt to kind of bring back regional kind of user group activities throughout the year. I think it's once a month is what they're trying to do, in order to supplement the annual Summit NA conference. So the Summit NA Roadshows coming up, we have not too long from now in Seattle, July 23rd, in New York, August 14th, and in Atlanta, September 25th. Go to dynamicscommunities.com/summit-roadshow to check out those events and sign up. And I believe I read those are free, kind of like a free user group event. I don't know the content or how they schedule it, but yeah, go check that out if you're in the neighborhood. And the tool of the week is the very exciting maintenance. I know it's not really a tool. It's not a fancy gadget. It's not a cool app, but let me tell you, if you start to get behind on maintenance, things start to get rough. And in cybersecurity, there's a term called attack surface. And so if you have 27 applications with a bunch of open ports, a lot of communication, you have a large attack surface. If you have a laptop that has no Wi-Fi, has no network connectivity, has everything locked down in hardened mode for Windows, it has a much smaller attack surface. It's barely usable, but it has a small attack surface. Well, maintenance is similar in that you have a maintenance surface, and the more stuff you got, the more systems, the bigger house, the bigger yard, the more cars, the more computers, you name it, the more maintenance surface you have. So that is my lesson of the week. So last week, I tried to deal with this. This is a pool cover, because if you own a pool, you will know if you don't have a pool cover on, you lose a lot of water, your chlorine burns through, you get a lot of leaves in the pool. So the pool cover is a convenient way to reduce the maintenance of the pool. But the pool cover itself becomes a maintenance item and it just starts falling apart. So I need a new pool cover. Well, they're not in stock. So I got to drive 30 plus minutes to some other store to go pick it up because I can't order it. So that's at least hour and a half round trip in LA. Haven't had a chance to do that. And it's $250 for a pool cover. Well, then got a message from our house sitters out in Utah, and the sprinkler valves are dying. So gotta go fix the sprinkler valves, find someone to get that done. We got a quote. Someone said $500 to $600 for one sprinkler valve. Something is wrong there, unless I'm misunderstanding inflation at this point in the US. So at this point, just going to probably replace all the sprinkler valves, right? So they're just sprinkler valves, but lawn care sprinklers. It's just one of those maintenance items, maintenance surface, right? Well, I like to have an espresso occasionally. Well, there's my little inexpensive espresso maker, relatively inexpensive espresso maker. It needs regular maintenance, and it actually needs maintenance more often than the maintenance indicator lights, the automatic maintenance indicator would let me believe. So in order to keep the steam wand working properly, I need to do maintenance on that thing, and I need to do not just one round of maintenance. I need to do 2 or 3 rounds of maintenance to deal with water hardness or whatever is clogging it up. And as you know, I have been sick for the last week, so my maintenance had to go to the clinic, get seen by the doctor. That took half a day, get some Cipro, and it's helping, but still sick, so probably another doctor in the future. And then, not to give me a day off, I think it was yesterday, day before, my NAS, network attached storage, starts beeping. I get these alerts, and storage degraded, volume degraded, drive has failed. And you'll see here, drive has crashed. Tried to pull it, put it back in, it is just dead. The kind of paradoxical thing is the smart drive statistics, utterly useless. Every single drive I've had failed, all the smart statistics said it was fine. If I click in this, the drive says healthy. Every single smart check says healthy. Even the one I ran manually, when it says the drive is dead, healthy. So I have a drive, should arrive today, I believe. Again, $220, $230 for that drive. So, I mean, it's obvious, but maintenance is just as important as that new system, the feature, the implementation. So I've had a couple conversations over the last several weeks where someone says, oh, well, I'll just learn how to do this customization for Business Central and I'll take care of it. And they're not Business Central partners, developers. It's either an ISV or a customer. And they just think, oh, yeah, I read about the API and how you can do a custom API. I'll just figure out how to do that. Now, maybe they are just way smarter than me. And in one case, I know this person is way smarter. The developer is really good, but he doesn't do BC development. So I just offered the warning that you can do that, and I'm sure you can figure it out, but just be aware there's a new release of Business Central every single month. So I highly recommend that you set up a DevOps pipeline with automated builds and automated testing and notifications. And he seemed to be a little annoyed by that, like I was insulting his skills as a ninja developer, and that's not it at all. It becomes a maintenance item, right? You're increasing your maintenance surface. And if he develops that custom API or that customization for BC, like without involving us as the partner, okay, you can do that. But if it breaks, I don't know what to tell you. The customer's business critical system integration is going to be down until that gets fixed. And maybe he can fix it in 10 minutes, but that's not how we like to do things as a BC partner. So everything new is a maintenance, increases your maintenance surface. So I recently see these, it's something like Zillow gone wild on Twitter, something like this, of these absolutely bonkers houses, 10,000 square foot houses for $12 million, massive, with bowling alleys and entire fast food restaurants in the house and giant meeting venues and full-size basketball courts. The maintenance on those, there's a commercial facilities basically, must be staggering. I don't want anything to do with those. So, yep, Welcome to my world. Thursday, jueves. Tanya did customer fixed asset training, and that was the first time I'd even seen Business Central fixed assets. I just have not had a chance to even look at it. It's not on my priority list, right? I don't typically implement it or deal with it. I'm on the dev side, but I took a look at it, and interesting, not too dissimilar from Dynamics GP. Pretty basic fixed assets is usually not a terribly complex feature set. Learned a few things, so that's what went on there. And on the ERP Center of Excellence side, had a call yesterday with the two trainees, Jocelyn and David, and we worked on RDLC report layouts. And for those of you who have done a lot of work with RDLC, we encountered an issue where we made a bunch of changes to the PO report layout. And after we did that, the report layout went haywire. It went from a one-page PO to a two-page PO, and some of the total, subtotal fields jumped to the middle of page one off to the right, and we couldn't figure out what was going on. It happened to the students when they were doing the modifications, just layout modifications, right? Just moving fields around, changing color. I said, okay, let me try it. And I went through the steps. The exact same issue happened to me after changing the position of 20 or 30 fields. And I didn't adjust the borders. I didn't do anything dramatic. Exact same problem. For a next attempt, we said, okay, let's try this. I made 4 changes, saved it as version 1, made 5 more changes, version 2, made 3 changes, version 3, made more and more changes, got to version 9. The report is fine. Essentially the exact same changes. Nothing dramatic. So we don't know that we actually did anything wrong or made any mistakes or caused it through our changes. My speculation at this point is actually David's speculation is maybe the cumulative impact of all of the changes that we made, something about Report Builder, there's a bug or something in it. When you hit save, it's trying to recompile, rebuild, and save that report output file. It's got a bug and it's messing up the position of a couple of fields in some circumstances. Because it happened to both of us completely independently, exact same symptoms with the same fields ending up in the wrong place. I cannot imagine that we did that. So I'm wondering if there is a bug in Report Builder. So if anyone has experience with that, let me know. And speaking of fixed assets, this is a throwback. Okay, so Eric Hogard says the same thing. He's seen the same thing multiple times. Tanya said that she and Alyssa have seen something similar. So I'm going to go with Report Builder bug. And what we're doing now is, let me just see if I can pull it up. This actually did not add really any time to our process. What we did is we did incremental versions. And all you need to do is just use save as instead of save. So we did save as 2, save as 3, and we would just gradually make a few changes, which is fine because we're having to just check the changes, make sure the position's okay, make sure our layout looks good. So really, you're saving and importing back into BC to test your report layout. So yeah, I got up to 9. It literally didn't take more than, say, 30 seconds, 60 seconds collectively over the entire formatting process. And interestingly, we did not reproduce the issue here. So our speculation is that by only making 3 or 4 changes or 5 or 6 changes at a time, not changing 50 fields at once, that Report Builder is somehow better able to handle that when it saves the file and it doesn't lose its mind. So this did work. And this did work, and the benefit of this is you screw something up, you can always roll back to the prior version very easily. So it kind of kills 2 birds, 1 stone in a sense. It would be nice if it just worked, but also if you do mess something up, this is kind of a nice fallback. So that's the method we're going to go with these trainees. So with that. So the fixed asset training reminded me in 2005, 2006, I implemented Dynamics GP with a customer that I believe had somewhere around 50,000 fixed assets. And they did washers and dryers, coin-operated washers and dryers throughout the Western United States. And so whether it's a college, dorm, apartment buildings, pretty much anywhere, even hotels where you would want to have a coin-operated commercial grade washer and dryer, laundromats, they would install, maintain, and collect the funds for all of these washers and dryers. So 50,000 washers and dryers we had to bring into Dynamics GP during, as part of the go live. We had to import them, classify them, do all of the books, and prior to go live, of course, we had to depreciate. And I think they had like 5 or 6 books. So it was a pretty massive effort. And Dynamics GP, because it just did each asset sequentially, was extraordinarily slow. It was single-threaded, one asset at a time. And I think it was something like we'd have to have a PC running continuously for over 30 days, assuming nothing went wrong. And of course, you couldn't reboot the server. You couldn't have any interruptions because it's just this monolithic single-threaded process. So I said, well, and Eric asks on the report, did you text compare your version 9 versus the broken one? No, I did not, because I overwrote the broken one. We can try to reproduce it again, and I'll see if I can figure out what the difference is. So as far as we could tell, it's screwing up the location of a couple fields, but we just don't know why. So anyway, I looked at this. I saw the performance, and I looked at this. So I said, well, really, ERP systems are just glorified databases and SQL statements in the back end. So I reverse engineered the fixed asset depreciation process and wrote custom stored procedures that would use set-based operations to depreciate all 50,000 assets. And I think these stored procedures ran in a matter of a couple hours. So we went from 30 days to, say, under 4 hours to do all of that depreciation. And it actually is not that complex. Fixed asset depreciation is pretty straightforward, and it's just basic math based on a certain depreciation timeline. And the different books, not difficult to figure out, double declining balance, whatever. So, yeah. So I was able to dig these up from 2006, and I hope to never use them again, but that was a doozy. And moving on to Friday, Viernes. That's today. Customers doing Power BI training. They are familiar with Power BI. So it's, once again, less about how to use Power BI, very, very specific discussion of how the customer's reports should be generated, customized, tailored, maintained. And yeah, so not a generic Power BI training similar to the BC training. And I'm doing my live stream, and I need to figure out the audio quirk. I believe the issue is that system audio is getting looped into vMix, and I'm not sure how or why that is happening. So if I have the system audio on my Scarlett Focusrite, it gets looped back into vMix, and need to figure out why that is occurring. And then morning ERP Center of Excellence training with Jocelyn is coming up. And then later on today, the customer will get training on Business Central customizations and extensions. And then I have a support call coming up with one of my ISV customers. And then afternoon training session with David for Business Central. I'm doing roughly 10 hours a week of training with Jocelyn and David still throughout the week. So that is definitely cramping my schedule. It's kind of tough to sustain that. And then Friday night, our internal BC dev meeting. So busy Friday, even though I do really need some sleep. And excellent update. I will be sponsoring another English Academy scholarship in July. So that is where for just $500. It is a 10-month intensive English program put on by an organization, private organization in El Salvador, who provides thousands of English training classes to Salvadorans. Pretty remarkable training program, very, very intense, really good instructors. So they have a great, highly structured program, takes someone from very little English to being call center proficient in 10 months. And I've spoken with Edgar, who is in Berlin, El Salvador. He started, I think, 3 or 4 months ago, and just phenomenal difference. I had a call with him when when he first got the scholarship, and then I met with him when I was there last month, and just the difference is shocking. So he's not fully conversant in English, but he is able to have limited conversation, and just his comfort level is really astonishing to see. So very interesting, effective program, and $500 for 10 months, like you just you can't compete with that. So, and then as I mentioned, the two students, Jocelyn and David, are working on learning RDLC report layout. So I grabbed this image of a purchase order just off the internet, just a nice generic, decent looking template. So the goal is to get a pixel perfect replication of that purchase order in this RDLC report. So that's what we were working on when we uncovered the bug. And so we had a call last night where I showed them just generic report writer tips and tricks. I'd never really used Report Builder, very, very little exposure to it. But if you've used one report writer, they're all very similar to Crystal Reports and other tools. So I showed them how to resize multiple fields at once, do alignment, do layering, to front, to back. We learned about how to set colors, and Jocelyn actually taught me a trick on how to do that quicker. And David pointed out that I'm going into the fields and expressions when I could just be clicking on the toolbar at the top. So they're actually teaching me the tricks that they're learning. So really interesting to watch them progress. And pretty soon they're going to be very proficient with RDLC report layout. So very cool to watch that unfold. And Q&A. Any Q&A for anyone that's still in the chat. So my questions to you would be, how much for a Business Central implementation, if you're a partner, how much time in general, or what's your method for estimating the time required for customer Business Central training? And I asked because let's say the customer is completely unfamiliar with Business Central. They've got to learn all the Business Central UI and quirks and terminology. But then, as I'm learning, they need to learn how they're going to use Business Central. So it's kind of like a dual training. Now, you may not need to teach them all the basics of someone who has never used ERP systems before, but like 40 hours with generic BC training, you can get cover a lot of territory there. But if you only have 40 hours to teach BC plus all the customer specific nuances, you cannot get through the same amount of territory. So how do you deal with that? And I'm noticing that the same thing with Tanya's training as what I experienced. You go through it on a Monday, but by Wednesday, you say, okay, where do you set bookmarks? Where do you activate personalization? Where do you limit the posting dates that are available for Business Central so that users don't post to a prior period? And understandably, the customer can't remember that because that was, discussed over 5 seconds on Monday. And they won't remember that you need to go into this page and go to this field to make that setting. They understand what limiting posting date or closing periods is, but just the pace that you have to go through to get the Business Central content plus all the customer specific content, very, very challenging. So really, you're trying to do two things at once, and how do you budget for that? It's not trivial. And as I mentioned, maintenance, very much akin to technical debt. If you are not constantly maintaining your knowledge, maintaining your systems, developing the skills to automate your maintenance, say through build pipelines, which is what we've done, automated testing, I assume you're going to be in trouble. So yeah, you can put it off for a while, but there's only so long I can put off my pool maintenance, my sprinkler maintenance, my health maintenance, my coffee maker maintenance. Same thing with Business Central customization, training, data maintenance, things like that. So yeah, maintenance, technical debt, how do you deal with that? And what is the largest, or what's what is your project with the most nav or BC fixed assets you've ever set up? In my case, it was Dynamics GP with roughly 50,000 fixed assets, which was, 50,000 doesn't sound too big, but turns out with fixed assets, especially go live depreciation, that is not trivial. So what is the largest number of fixed assets you've ever worked with in Nav or Business Central? And question from, apologize if I'm mispronouncing it, question from Shirak. What is the best place to start thoroughly learning BC customization and development? It's a good question, valid question, and it is a little bit of a challenge. Only thing that I typically point to, two things actually. So let me go to my YouTube page here. And so on my YouTube channel, it says youtube.com/Steve Endo. If you go to playlists and you scroll down, I have a playlist called Learning BC Dev from Scratch. And the only challenge with this is that it is a bit old. So let's see, when was this? Let me grab one of these. Yeah, this was 3 years ago. And some of the fundamentals will be the same, but some of the details have changed. And also, this learning BC Dev from Scratch was based off of using Docker containers, which occupied like the first 1 or 2 episodes. It was very painful to get Docker set up back then. Things have improved dramatically. I've learned a lot. BC Container Helper has improved. Docker seems to be a little more stable on Windows. So yeah, so this may be a starting point. However, this series is based off of the BC Development Workbook. Gosh, it is Christoph's GitHub Learning BC Workbook. I normally have this at the top of my... Anyway, let's see if it's in the chat, in the comments here. And let me scroll down. There it is. AL for Beginners PDF. Here we go. So AL for Beginners. So if you go to GitHub, the MyNav blog is Christoph's account, and he has a workbook called AL for Beginners. So that is my recommendation for someone starting from scratch. It assumes you understand programming and have some programming, software development background and technical background. If you don't have that yet, I recommend Replit to get started at least. So he has version 2 of the AL for Beginners workbook, and this is a PDF version 2022. It is a couple years old, but programming in AL for beginners. Here's the doc. Okay, so it's not letting me download. It's a GitHub thing, but let me just pull it up. Let's go to downloads. Boom. Yes. Oh, it already exists. So I've done this before. And there you go. Programming in AL for Beginners, version 2. And he starts with the basics, preparing your development environment, VS Code, extensions, tables, enum, pages, permission sets. It is basic. It starts from scratch and you can walk through. So that is my recommendation if you want to learn BC development from scratch. And I will be developing a curriculum for ERP Center of Excellence that starts from the very beginning and from scratch, like you do not know how to program. So a Salvadoran wants to learn development. We're going to start with Replit. And let me just bring that up. So if you're not familiar with it, Replit is a web-based IDE. It's an entire platform where you can start from scratch in 30 seconds coding. And let me just log in here if I can. And they have a pretty cool Python development course. So it's 100 days of Python, 100 days of code, and it is a full step-by-step process where it gives you a code sample, teaches you different topics, and you type the code and then you run. And this is no IDE required, no runtime. You don't have to install anything. So fastest way to get up and running in coding. And they don't support all languages, but they support quite a few. They don't have tutorials on all languages, but if you're starting from scratch, Python is as good as any. So that's what I'd recommend there. So with that, one last tip on Q&A. It's not a tip really, but interesting thing. If you want to watch something shockingly fascinating, this guy, his channel on YouTube is called Rainbolt. I don't know his name. I think he's in Germany, based on the clues I've gleaned from his channel. But he does the web-based game. It's basically his career called GeoGuessr, where Google's Street View image shows up, and he has to guess where in the entire world that image is from. And if you watch him work, it is just staggering how well he knows these images. He can instantly pick out what country it's from, and then he'll generally know whether it's north, south, east, west, near the coast, whatever. Well, this video is about him competing with a new GeoGuessr AI. And I think it was out of Stanford or Harvard. These students, 3 or 4 students got together, used AI tools to train based off of Street View images, and based off of roughly 250,000 images throughout the world. And there are, millions and millions of Street View images. Based on just 250,000 images, their AI is able to identify the location of the image with an accuracy that is unfathomable. So I highly recommend searching for this video on Rainbolt's channel. It's a year old, but shocking. Utter disbelief how good this thing is, that it can even get down to the correct neighborhood. And it's a picture of trees and a road. Like really, very, very few clues, but it's able to do things like identify the direction and shape and style of the light pole and the power wires. And based off of that pattern, it's able to somehow statistically correlate it with this area in, say, New Zealand. It's truly bizarre. So fascinating. Go check that out. So with that, I'm exhausted, and I'm going to be doing training with Jocelyn later today. So have a good weekend. Cheers. And I will talk with you later. Adios.